Estrangement is not always loud, sometimes it's silence. It's a feeling of distance that lingers even when the person is still alive. This work explores how photography can become a therapeutic process for those experiencing that kind of emotional loss. Estrangement, especially within families, can fracture a person's sense of identity. Carrying grief without a funeral, guilt without wrongdoing. Unmothered is a deeply personal body of work that explores the emotional aftermath of maternal estrangement, its absence, its echoes, and the silent remainders it leaves behind. This project reflects my own experience of severing contact with my mother in 2023. It was a painful but necessary decision, made in the pursuit of safety, stability, and self-preservation. This work is rooted in themes of memory, identity, grief, and the longing for connection. It stems from years of emotional harm and fractured relationships built on instability and unmet needs. But Unmothered is not simply about absence, it's about the presence of what is missing. The emotional weight carried into adulthood, the gaps in memory, the aching silence where a voice used to be. I use childhood photographs and symbolic natural elements to tell this story. These are not just pictures of the past, they are fragments of identity. Records of a life touched by someone who is no longer allowed close. I physically manipulated photographs as an act of survival. This removal reflects not just the loss of a relationship, but the emotional labour of rewriting my story without a central figure. Trees appear throughout my work as symbols of bloodline and ancestry. In one image, a handprint pressed onto a tree stump marks my mother's lasting imprint. The stump, a broken tree, represents the severed connection and the family tree we no longer share. Red string runs across the work, connecting prints and objects. Inspired by the concept of the invisible string, an unseen but persistent emotional tie, it symbolises the bond that continue even in absence. These threads stretch, fray and tangle, much like memory and grief. In developing Unmothered, I was particularly moved by the work of Suella, Holland, whose exploration of trauma and memory through photographic layering and stitching gave me a framework to approach my own story. In her work, the image becomes a site of healing, a way to speak that cannot always be said. I resonate with her use of thread and fragmentation as a way to symbolise both damage and resilience. Another key influence was Qinyao dye, whose photographic practice often centred around absence, longing, and familial rupture. Her use of quiet, symbolic imagery and intimate visual metaphors encouraged me to consider how silence, shadows, and stillness can say more than direct representation. In Unmothered, shadows represent those invisible emotional bonds that still linger. The past isn't easily erased. Memories remain in our environments, in our bodies. The handwritten layered text across some images comes from journal entries and private reflections, visualising internal dialogue and unresolved grief. The process of making Unmothered was both cathartic and painful, revisiting old photographs, choosing which ones to alter, where to place the red thread, or what fragments to keep. All of it required emotional labour and vulnerability. The act of creating was a form of reclaiming. By physically manipulating these images, I was able to reassert control over a story I was once powerless in. This wasn't about erasing the past, but about making space to process it. The project became a therapeutic tool, a way to externalise pain, observe it, and ultimately live alongside it. Unmothered doesn't offer resolution. It accepts the complicated, the unresolved, the unspoken. It acknowledges the strength it takes to build a self without a foundational relationship. Unmothered stands as a visual testament to the quiet strength found in walking away from harm. It's for anyone navigating life without the people we're told are meant to care for us. It's a reminder that family is not always chosen, and identity can still be whole, even when it grows from fractured roots. This body of work honours both the wound and the growth. It asks viewers to consider what is meant to carry invisible grief, and how art can give voice to what we're told to keep silent.